We've got Brian, pronouns he, him, calling in from Man Nipples or maybe Minnesota. As a theist who wants to explain why he believes in the Christian God. Brian, you are on the line. How are you doing today?
Good.
Hey, Brian.
Brian,
Okay. Can I go ahead?
Yeah, what's
yeah,
your
it
question,
just says
or what
here,
did you
it
want to
just
say?
says here, wants to explain why they believe. So tell me whatever you want.
Okay. I think that, and I've listened to your first caller. I think that atheists, not to mention some religious people, like I think to some extent the guy you were just talking to, they misperceive the nature of religious belief. It seems to me that the or God, specifically the Christian God, is taken on faith. In other words, it's simply assumed to be true, not proven based on evidence. In other words, people take the Christian God's existence as an article of faith, not by weighing the evidence and arguments for its existence. Um, uh, so now that might seem irrational, it might seem dumb and unscientific, but many scientific and mathematical theories, and arguably all scientific and mathematical theories, are grounded in assumptions. In other words, for example, Einstein's theory of special relativity is based on what they usually call postulates, but that's just another word for assumptions. In addition, the geometry of Greek mathematician Euclid was based on axioms. Basically, Euclidean geometry is basically plane geometry. It's based on axioms, which again is just another word for assumptions. So religious belief is not based on evidence. It's based on just making assumptions. Now, the question then is, why would you do that? The reason you do that is because you simply think you'd benefit from it in some way. And, it seems to me that there are many different reasons why different people would do that. There's, all kinds of different reasons. One reason I think is beneficial is because you need a God to have objective morality. You cannot have, you can't have objective morality without a God, or at least something like a God concept. The problem that atheists have with morality is that, is what the Scottish philosopher David Hume said, that you can't get an ought from an is. That's one thing he said. He said, you cannot get an ought from an is. In other words, you can't get a moral prohibition or a moral requirement, simply from, facts.
Brian, I feel like we're getting like, this is not a conversation at this point. You're just making like a billion different little points. So let's
I have like
start
30 things to
somewhere.
say.
Yeah, let's start
Okay.
somewhere. And I feel like Forrest maybe can point us in a good direction. I am eager to hear his
I
response because I imagine where it's about to go. And let's go from there because you took it about a bunch of different places. Is that all right?
All right.
Okay.
yeah, if you're okay with it, like just some of the things you said immediately, I don't want to. I'll be honest with you. I'm happy to talk about these things, but I'd rather talk about the Christian God in particular because like that's Eve's area of expertise, and I want to hear what she has to say about it because she'd be better equipped than me. Just what you said a second ago there kind of rubbed me the wrong way though, because you compared the assumptions made in science, which yeah, there are some things that we kind of you could call them assumptions. In fact, sometimes we do too. Things like uniformitarianism, the same laws of nature apply everywhere. That's something that I talked about in the last call, right? That was brought up by since the foundation of especially geology is that like, all right, there aren't special rules for rocks in this part of the world than there are for this part of the world, and now we say there aren't special laws of physics in Andromeda than there are in the Milky Way. The laws of physics are the laws of physics. The laws of chemistry are the laws of chemistry. These things apply all over the place. That's uniformitarianism. And you could call that an assumption. In fact, a lot of times we do. But we don't use that word the same way that we would use the word in terms of religion. Whereas to say, I'm assuming this God or I'm assuming the supernatural, I'm assuming which is necessarily something without evidence. So, like uniformitarianism, we have yet to find a single thing that doesn't obey the same laws of physics, no matter where we look. So, that kind of assumption is reasonable and expected. And until we find something that changes that, it makes sense to keep going with this because it's working great. The reason why you're able to call us on the internet right now is because of those types of assumptions. You know, but when we talk about that and compare it to a God claim, and then you start into this new conversation of we can't have objective reality without a God, that's a totally different assumption. That's like using the word theory to mean evolution on one hand and I think I know where my sock went in the dryer on the other hand. Like that's very different uses of the word theory. One is scientific and one is colloquial. And what you're doing is you're conflating a scientific and a colloquial use of the word assumption to try to prop up your worldview to the level of a scientific one. And I don't think that's reasonable. I'll let you respond to that. But beyond that, I don't like I said, I don't think this is a productive use of this conversation. I'd rather hear about your Christian God. So respond to what I said, and then we'll move to the next thing.
Well, first of all, I think that is, I think I think my Christian, I think I am talking about the Christian God. I think the Christian God is taken on faith. You, you know, you, and I, this is something talked about in the Bible, talked about by Jesus. The people who, there's some people who saw Jesus in person. He maybe cured their diseases or whatnot, so they didn't have to take him on faith. But there's other people, that it talks about in the Bible who didn't see Jesus, but he's taken on faith. So that is, to me, that is a concept in the Bible, and I don't think fundamentally.
Why should we care?
I just don't. Wait, what?
Why should we care about what the Bible's saying? I'm asking you the same question that I would ask if somebody that worships the Muslim God was telling me about the Quran. Like, why should I care?
Well, you specifically don't have to, but the reason I would is simply because I believe that believing in the Christian God is simply beneficial to me.
So, okay, you believe that it's beneficial to believe it. Got it. There are people that believe in other gods that think it's beneficial for them to believe in those gods. So are you all right? Or are you the only one that's right? And why are they wrong?
I don't think that they're necessarily wrong. They've chosen to believe it because they think they benefit from their beliefs.
Does that make it true?
Within their worldview, it does make it true for them.
Does
And
it make
likewise,
that God exist? So does it make whatever God, like, because it makes you feel better, does that make that God exist?
well, yes, effectively, yes.
But what about gods that claim that that there are no other gods? So then you have you believing in this God, or whoever, somebody believing in a God that says there are no other gods, and somebody else over here believing in a God that says there's no other gods, and these are two separate gods that these two people are believing in, but they both think it's beneficial to them to believe in these two separate gods that claim there are no other gods. So which one is true?
Well, if
or are there actually no gods? Maybe you don't actually believe in a God. Maybe you just, or you do, but you believe that it's not real. You just think it's good to believe it, even though it's not real. I'm trying to understand.
Well, if there's another God that argues that the Christian God doesn't exist, then I simply don't believe in that God.
Okay, I hear you, but what about the person that believes in that God? I'm asking, what's the difference between you believing in this God that says there's no other gods and somebody believing in another God that says there's no other gods?
Well, that person has chosen to believe in that God, and I've chosen to believe in this God.
Okay, but which of you is right?
Well, I'm right. I believe I'm right.
How do you know that?
I've chosen to believe that. Um,
Just choosing to believe something make it true.
well, look, but as I was saying, I don't believe that.
I would love it if you'd
I don't.
answer her question.
Well, I'm trying to answer it. I'm trying to say I think you and I
No,
have a different
the answer to
understanding of
her,
what belief is.
excuse me, Brian. The answer to her question would be a yes or a no. You don't have to
Oh,
explain
oh
what you were talking about. She asked you, does wanting and choosing to believe in something make it true?
yes.
Okay, I
Okay.
choose to believe right now that Forrest is a unicorn. Is Forrest a unicorn?
Um,
I wish. I wish it worked like that. That would be
Say
so
yes, say
cool.
yes, say yes, say yes, say yes.
um, if if based on your definitions and in your worldview you believe that, I would say yes.
So you,
Explain that. So
I,
so Forrest is a unicorn now because I
nope.
chose to believe that.
Um, well, yeah. I mean, you can believe whatever you want. So
You
yeah, you
can
can
It
believe
doesn't
whatever you
matter.
want. How do you figure out if it's true or not?
Um, well, I think that okay. I mean, I wouldn't believe that just because it doesn't make sense. And what I'm saying is, I don't
But it's
believe something
true.
like that
But that
is
wasn't
It's
my
true
true
because
question.
because she chose to
You
believe it. So don't you want to believe it because it's true? She chose to believe it. That makes it true, right?
for her, yes. But
what is anything actually real then, Brian? Is there any you brought up objectivity. Is anything objectively real or true?
well, but again,
Or are
as
we
I
all
said,
just making up our own worlds?
but again, as I pointed out, Einstein's
That
theory of
wasn't you
special
didn't answer my
relativity
That's
question.
is
not.
Can you
based.
answer my question, Brian? Is
Okay,
anything true? Is anything real? Is there any kind of objectivity to this, or are we all just making up whatever we want?
I think that there's objective. Yes, I think that there's things that are true and objective. Um, but I don't think we can as human beings fully understand the world around us. We can't. We have to make some sort of assumptions about the world and go with those things. And for us, those things end up having to be true, because of our limitations. It seems to me.
I have two questions if it's okay. Um, you did just kind of answer this a minute ago, but it flew in the face of everything else you've said for the rest of the call. You just said a second ago that you do believe that there are some objective truths about the universe, that there is objective reality. But that's very different from what you just said a moment ago when Eve asked if I was a unicorn, and you said if you believe it, then he is, and that's true for you. I don't understand what true for you means. If I believe that I can fly and I jump off of a building, will I fly or will I plummet to my death?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. That's a good question.
I'd like
Um.
an answer to it then.
Okay. Okay. Ask that again, please.
So
If
you
you
weren't
want,
listening in the first place. Cool. I'll ask again. Yes.
well,
So if I believe with my whole heart that I can fly like Superman and I jump off of the Empire State Building, will I fly because I believe it, therefore it's true, or will I fall to my death because gravity is objectively real, no matter what I believe?
I believe that you will fall and die. That's based on my
Okay.
understanding of the
So
world.
then we can
What will
agree,
happen though?
we can agree that there are objective facts about reality and that there's no such thing as true for you. Something's either true or it isn't. Is that correct? Or do you think that's different?
Yes. Well, yeah. There are things that are true, objectively true. Um, yeah. I'll say yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. So then we'll go back and ask again, am I a unicorn, no matter how many people believe it? Or am I a human being? Because that's objective reality.
Okay, so it seems to me, strictly speaking, there's an objective answer to it based on the
There's a
definitions you impose,
there's a
but
literal
I don't
answer.
know the answer.
Okay, can I try
You
to
But
let me
don't
I
try to
know
can't.
phrase it
whether
this
I'm a
way.
human or a unicorn, is what you're saying. You do not know. You cannot assess at this moment whether I am a human being or a unicorn.
I can tell you
Is
whether
that what
I
you're
believe
actually saying?
you are. I can tell
No,
you
I'm
whether
not
I
asking what you
believe that you're a
believe.
unicorn.
I'm asking, can you, Brian, assess right now, just by your ears and eyes alone, whether the person speaking to you is a magical horse with a horn or a person?
I can make an assessment based on my understanding of talking to you and so forth. But that's based on my understanding of the world.
Okay, so Brian, I have a question. Is it an objective fact that the Christian God exists?
Um, um,
Weird
I
that it
would
takes
say
that long to
yes.
answer.
You would say yes. So why? How do you know that?
It seems to me that it's based on my assumptions. Ultimately, it's based on my assumptions
A God
about
objectively exists because you, Brian, in 2024 happen to assume he does.
yes.
Is that a good reason to believe that?
Yes.
Why?
I think, but as I was saying, it seems to me all beliefs are ultimately based on some sort of assumptions,
But
and
Brian, what
Can
if
I
you picked the wrong God? What if there is a God and it hates the God that you chose and it's going to punish you for all of eternity because you picked the wrong God because you just decided to believe in that one? How do you make sure you get it right?
I don't think there is a way to make sure that you get it right. You have to do the best you can based on what you know. And one of the things that Christianity advocates is learning as much as you can. It Proverbs says that. So I try to learn as much as I can.
It also
But
advocates for not leaning on your own understanding at all and basically being brain dead and becoming a robot and letting you become the mind of Christ. So it says a lot of things.
right.
Yeah, I think it sounds like there's not a good reason. It sounds like very similar to our previous caller, actually. You happen to believe in this God, you think it does better things for your life. I wonder if there's some other God or not believing in a God, if maybe your life would be even better then. Like, how would you even measure that if that's a good reason to believe something or not? So I'm just not hearing any actual reason for believing other than like you just decided to. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, again, it seems to me that it's beneficial to believe in a religion. I think it's beneficial to believe in
Objectively?
Christianity. I mean, I don't.
is it beneficial to believe in Christianity?
It seems to me that you can only get objectivity. Um, as I was saying, you can only get some sort of objective beliefs based on some God, right?
I have multiple questions.
Yeah, let's hear what
You
Forrest
just
has
said,
to ask.
yeah, I just want to, I have two big ones, but like you just threw another whole wrench in what I was gonna say. But you just said, we'll start here. You just said that you think that it's beneficial to believe in Christianity. That's what you just said, right?
Yes.
How beneficial is it for women and LGBT people?
Well, that's just the question. How beneficial it is for them. I think, and I know what you're saying, and what you're getting at. There's some passages in the
Be
Old
great if you
Testament
just
saying,
answered my question instead of giving me 30 minutes of why you're going to answer the question someday. Just an answer would be great.
okay, okay, is it? I would say yes, yes, it is.
Neat. Eve,
Do
any
you
follow-ups on
do
that
you
one?
yeah. Yeah, I we'll get to that part in a second actually because I haven't was it beneficial to the people during the Crusades that were killed for not converting? Was that beneficial that people believed in the Christian God?
Well, of
Because
course. If they believed,
objectively
they wouldn't have been murdered.
right, right. Yeah, I guess at knife point, that would have been a good reason. But do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Also, what about when during the times when they would enslave other humans here in the States and they would
Mm.
make Bibles, slave Bibles, they were called that. And they used that belief in a God to try to maintain control over fellow human beings.
All that
Did
part
that
from the New
belief in the
Testament
Christian God? Yeah.
where Jesus says, "Slaves, obey your masters, especially your Christian masters, so you can partake in their part of heaven," and all
Right.
that.
And what about every day when I get comments from Christians telling me, quoting Timothy, whatever that verse is in Timothy,
Timothy, yeah.
telling me that I shouldn't speak because I'm a woman? Is that beneficial to me? Is that faith beneficial?
It's well, it seems to me that um, that part of the Bible is not spoken directly by Jesus. I tend to take a
Oh, of
reductive
course, of
view
course.
toward,
Cool.
It's
Okay,
to
the
some
so what I
it's
extent.
the
have
wrong
so let's
Bible
talk about
parts.
Jesus. So when I was in an abusive relationship and I was told to turn the other cheek, was that a beneficial Christian belief for me to have? And then it made me
In some
stay in an
cases,
abusive
it might have.
relationship for years. And I almost lost my life because of it. So was that beneficial?
I think properly interpreted, um,
Mm.
I think a passage like that is
Damn, I wish
beneficial.
I
And
had a better interpreter around when that verse was given to me.
Yeah. Damn.
So it seems
What
objectively it's not beneficial, like as this blanket belief. Maybe if you conform it just perfectly, just right, and you take what you want out of it and you cherry pick it and create a beautiful bouquet, which you can do. You can pick some really cool things. You have to leave out a lot. So, would it be a good idea to just hand somebody a Bible and say, you should just straight up go with all of this?
the Bible never says to take itself literally. It never says that the entirety of let's say the Protestant Bible is all you know a direct command. But it seems to me that it's a fairly accurate rendition of history. That's the way I tend to take the
except for
Bible.
except for all the
Except
parts
for
that are
where it's
obviously
just not.
historically inaccurate. Yeah, that's neat.
Such
Yeah,
as,
like nobody actually wandered around in a desert for 40 years because there's zero archaeological evidence for that whatsoever. And it was a
Yeah.
massive amount of people. The claim was,
Yeah. Also a pharaoh
well,
and like the entire army of Egypt was never drowned in the Red Sea.
right.
well, I mean, it's hard to know whether those things occurred or not. I don't.
It's not hard
Um,
to know
Is
whether or not a
it?
global flood happened.
Yeah, we
There
would
was
know
never
that.
a yeah, there would be pretty
well,
good
look,
evidence for all of these things, especially a global flood would be like one that we'd have a ton of evidence for.
yeah. Well, look, I, I think it's pretty. I think you have to take the Bible with a little common sense. Like
Where do you get that
If
common
you
Genesis.
sense from? Brian, where do you get that common sense from?
Where do I get the common sense from?
Yeah.
From reading, thinking carefully. My knowledge of the world. Um, taking the Bible, reading it carefully, and taking the whole part of it and applying, skeptical thought, which is something that the Bible advocates.
And
Um,
where do you think you got the ability to think that way? Do you think it came from God? Because you implied objective. thought has to, or morality has to come from God. So do you think your ability to think that way came from God?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay, so God decided to make a book that requires you to have to leave a bunch of shit out of it to properly understand him. In fact, if you actually follow a lot of the shit, then you're going to get in big trouble and be going against moral code. Because do you think that it would be moral to own a slave right now? I'm going to go ahead and guess that you don't think it would be. You sound like a
Oh no,
decent
no, no,
person.
no. Let him answer. Let him
You
answer. Brian, is
No, no, I
slavery
don't. No, I
moral?
don't.
Cool.
No, I
So
don't.
you're having
Awesome.
to actively go against teachings supposedly came out of the mouth of this God,
From
and you're
God.
having to use supposedly the brain he gave you to undo that. It doesn't make any sense.
Wha- Um, where in the Bible does it say that slavery is morally correct?
Well,
A
God
lot,
gives
several times
tons,
actually.
tons of laws that he tells his people that they can use. Hey, if you're
E-
gonna have a slave, this is how you can treat him. This is what you can do. There's like a lot
Yeah,
of that.
Exodus gives like specific rules on like where to buy slaves from, how much to pay for them, how to beat them properly, like
And you
how to
would think
keep
if
it.
God
If they're a Hebrew slave, you do XYZ thing, and then they can be your slave forever. If it's non-Hebrew slave, they're your property that you can pass down to your children. It's
Yep.
really clearly written out.
Also, Jesus talks about it too, and you would think that if
Yes.
Jesus had the foresight of a god, he would be like, "You know what? This slavery issue is not only a big deal now, it's going to continue to be, and it's going to be awful.
Hmm.
I should say something because Brian is loving that I say stuff about turning the other cheek and sell your things to the poor. So maybe people like
And don't eat
Brian will
shellfish.
will listen to me and I should say also don't own other human beings." But he didn't say that. So how is that a beneficial back to what you said, this is beneficial objectively for people to believe? It seems
Well,
not, unless you maybe want to own slaves.
you're kind of assuming, I think, that he didn't say that because keep in mind that the Bible
Well,
doesn't
he
necessarily.
didn't find a way to let us know if he did. It's not
Okay.
you would think that that would be a really important piece of information.
He mentions not eating shellfish like 12 fucking times, but he couldn't find the time to be like, also, human beings aren't farming equipment and you shouldn't treat them as such. Like,
Wait a minute. Jesus
where are
said
this
not to
dude's
eat
priorities?
shellfish.
I think Forrest is saying that God says that in
The
the
God
Bible.
of the Bible, yes, yes, just
And
in general.
supposedly Jesus and God are pretty close. So you would think they'd
Okay.
be in
Well, I
cahoots
don't.
on
The
all that.
same
I
guy in
actually
three
don't believe that.
persons or whatever.
Yeah, I actually don't believe that specific belief because it's not in the Bible.
Cool.
But that's another issue.
So, okay, so you don't believe in the God of the Old Testament. You just believe in Jesus, who
Well,
claimed
I
to
don't
have been
believe
the
in
son
the
of the
Trinity.
God of the Old Testament. I didn't say anything about the Trinity. Supposedly, Jesus and God are actively working together. Jesus says that
Mhm.
he's the fulfillment of the prophecy, which is God from over in the
He,
Old Testament. So you
he
kind
says
of
he
have to
comes not
take
to
the Old Testament. Yeah, go ahead, Forrest.
Yeah, I was just going to follow it up and just say, doesn't he say like I'm not come to change the law, but to fulfill it? Like
But to
I'm
fulfill
here
it, yeah.
for
Yeah.
everything that happened in the Old Testament, everything God said, I am the embodiment of, and I am here to fulfill that truth. So like, if God said in the Old Testament that if you trim the sides of your hair and beard, you're sinful and going to hell. God said in the Old Testament that a woman who's menstruating shouldn't go into churches. God in the Old Testament said that what was another one, that if two men are fighting and a woman tries to break them up and accidentally touches one of their penises, they have to cut off their hands. Like that's Jesus was about that, dude. So like I'm sorry, you can't separate this.
I don't remember that part of the Bible. So,
You should go
Read it
reread it.
again.
It's really interesting. Yeah, especially if you are claiming that this is beneficial for everyone to believe.
well, I have read the Bible. I mean,
Sure.
I think some of the things are possibly either we don't understand them or they're things that, or well, some of them we don't necessarily understand. Other things aren't necessarily still applicable, and other things, I think
Can I
particularly the
can I point
Genesis
something
is
out?
just okay.
So you made the claim that Christianity provides objective morality, but you're using subjectivity, like I think we all do, to go through the Bible and say this thing is moral, this thing is not. this makes sense, you're not using the Bible as your moral standard. You are using common sense, like you said, which I think is great. And thank God
Hmm.
you're doing that, no pun intended, because you are getting rid of some of those really awful beliefs that do not need to be continued 2,000 years later. So you are essentially better than the belief you claim is beneficial for all. You seem to be more kind and more empathetic and have more common sense than the religion that you think is objectively moral.
Well, I think if you look at what the way Jesus lived his life and the things he said, um, I think those are pretty consistent with what I believe.
No, it isn't.
It
Jesus
doesn't
said
sound like
slaves
it.
should obey their masters.
Well, okay, but he's talking right, but he's talking about the slaves, talking about people in that situation. He's not saying
And
that
they should obey their
slavery is right.
masters? Is that good
Yeah, so
advice?
so
Like,
Well,
why
I think
slavery
some
in
why not say
America,
masters free your slaves, don't own other human beings? Why did he take
wouldn't
that
that be
time to
nice?
say, "Hey, be a better victim"? Why didn't he say, "Hey, stop fucking oppressing people"?
Hmm.
I think effectively he did. I mean, I think
But he didn't. He
he
literally
advocated.
But
didn't. There's no effectively.
he
He
did the
literally did
exact
not.
opposite of that.
Well,
How do
look,
you square that circle, Brian? How does somebody say slaves need to obey and you hear slaves should be free? How does that work? That's some
well, he's
1984 shit, dude.
right, but he's talking to the slaves. He's saying, hey, if you're in a bad situation, he's essentially, if you're in a bad situation, do make the best of it in that when you're
That's
in that situation. And I think
so
that's what
obeying and being beaten is making the best of a bad situation, according to you.
in some situations, yes.
So the dude couldn't open the other half of his mouth and say, hey, don't own humans as property. But he could say, obey. Obey the
I think he
people
might
who
have.
own you and beat you. And then 2,000 years later, some dude named Brian will know that what I really meant was just try to make the best of shit. Yeah, life gets
Well,
you down. You get enslaved. Just try to keep a smile on.
but again,
What?
you don't know if he didn't say that. Remember, the Bible isn't necessarily an
You're right,
exhaustive
Brian.
Well,
You're
we
right.
also
tradition
And
that
don't
that is
we
why
also
said.
I
don't know that
know
he
that
Go ahead,
that's
Forrest.
why I know that Jesus was all about anal fisting, because I don't know that he didn't talk about it. I have no evidence to believe that he didn't talk about it, and that's why I believe,
Oh.
because the Bible doesn't say so, that Jesus is all about fisting.
Right, right. But what he did say is love your neighbor as yourself. That's what he
Cool,
did
and that's
say.
wonderful, and that
Why didn't
makes
he say
sense. So
love your
we
slave?
yeah.
God.
But
But again,
but
I think he
but
may have
Brian, you're
said
doing
that.
what I said. Brian, you're doing what I said. You're just picking and choosing the few parts of the Bible that sound nice, which I can go find in a million other books. I can recommend some books about being a loving and kind person to you if you want that have nothing to do with the Bible, and they offer much better insight, and they also don't tell you to be a good slave. So that we can get there. But you are better than this religion. Like, as we're talking about it, you are subjectively looking at it and picking and choosing. There's no objective morality to this faith.
I wouldn't. I guess I disagree with that to some extent. It seems to me that there's some things stated in the Bible, pretty clearly. Um, like I said, love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, I think that's
I
stated
can
very
I can be better than the
clearly.
Bible right now. I can go right down, love your neighbor as yourself and don't own other people as slaves. And wow, suddenly I am more moral than the Bible.
Okay, yeah, if you want to start another religion, go ahead, and maybe you could start a better religion, in practice. Maybe that's possible.
Then Brian,
I
why do
think
you need
that's
religion then?
What's
If
the
you
fucking
already
point, dude?
Yeah, if you're already better than that religion, then maybe it's holding you back.
It sounds like, Brian, you are not a good person because of your religion. You're a good person in spite of it. You are going out
Absolutely.
of your way to justify and excuse away and make up stories about your religion in order to make it fit with your modern secular morality. And
Well,
all of this comes from the beginning of the call when you said that something can be true because you just believe it and therefore it is. So you've decided that you're right. You've decided that God is moral. And now, no matter what awful, evil shit the Bible says, your answer is, well, you can't prove that he didn't say something good. And I think he probably did. Therefore, objective morality bends to my will. And this is what happened. Does that sound reasonable to
well,
you?
well, you're leaving out the fact that you can. One advantage of like joining Christianity is that there's other people who kind of are already in that tradition, and
Nobody's
I think
saying there
there
aren't
are plenty.
benefits
Unless
to being in religion,
unless
but
you're a
we're saying that
homosexual and you get thrown on the
right,
pyre to burn witches, then it's not really a benefit. But like for everybody else, sure, yeah. For all the
any of
straight
the
white Christian males, it's great. If you're straight and cisgender and white,
yep.
you're gonna have a great time in Christianity.
Yep, and
Well,
any
keep in
benefits
mind,
that you can find, Brian, any benefits that you can find within Christianity, you can find outside of it minus all the bigotry and like just nonsensical anti-science.
it's possible. Yeah, it's possible.
It,
Let's
it's
let's
it's
prove it.
it's not
It's
just
it's not
possible,
just
we're doing
possible,
it.
it's true. So I challenge you then. Can you give me one example of a good moral benefit that you cannot get outside of Christianity? A good thing that you can do or say or think that I or Eve as atheists cannot.
Well, I would say that you could come up with your own, essentially your own religion. Let's say you throw
I would
out the
say
part
that you
about
should answer the question.
can't. Well, the answer is no,
Right.
effectively.
So now, follow up question, Brian. Can you think of any bad, evil things that a Christian would do that Eve or I, as atheists, would not do?
And they would be
Uh,
justified in doing so according to their religious
Yes.
text.
is something bad that they would do?
Is
Yes.
there
What is a
something that
bad
a
thing?
Christian could do and back it up with the Bible that Forrest and I would not do?
I don't know what you wouldn't do. I'm not sure what you wouldn't do.
I wouldn't have
Okay,
fucking
that you wouldn't
slaves.
do. Let's say what you wouldn't do, Brian.
Oh, okay. So you're asking me something that I wouldn't do,
That
that
a
you
Yes.
Christian
would
could
do,
do and justify it using your religious text.
something that I could do and justify it using my
I can
religious
rephrase it.
text.
What is something that a Christian could do and they could justify it using the Bible that you would consider immoral? You
Okay.
already
Yeah.
answered this
Oh, okay.
earlier. You told us that owning people is immoral. So,
Yeah.
and a Christian could easily and historically have done that.
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
And we can
So,
Yeah.
make
And
a
I
list as
disagree
long
with
as
that.
your arm, dude. There's slavery, the Crusades, killing homosexuals, slaughtering non-believers for any the Inquisition, mass torture, forced conversions, colonialism. Like there's a manifest destiny. There's a million examples of horrific shit that people have done throughout history because they believed the Bible compelled them to do so that you would never ever do without that belief, without that baggage. So, to get back to Eve's question a minute ago that you dodged just like all the other questions, why not just construct your own morality, your own system without the baggage of this religion? Why not accept that you can be a good person without any of that?
Because again, objective morality requires at least some sort of God belief. It just requires that. Now,
We
I don't
just
think you necessarily
established
have Christianity.
that we just established that you're not using objective morality.
I'm not using objective morality.
You are subjectively picking and choosing which parts of your religious text to follow.
I would say that what I'm doing is reading the whole thing and coming to an understanding of what it's saying, based on a careful reading and a reading of it in context and so forth.
And do you think there's no
What
subjectivity
context?
involved in that? You
What
just
question? Which question should I have there?
Sorry, no, you go
do you
first,
think
please.
that there's no subjectivity involved in that process you just mentioned?
I think there's probably some subjectivity. Yeah,
It's all subjectivity.
yeah, there's definitely subjectivity. There's nothing perfect about it.
Right. So you don't follow objective morality. As I said earlier, thankfully you don't, because if you objectively followed the Bible, you would be wanted in
The
most
monster.
countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my point again is that I think you are a better person than this faith that you are following. And you're having to dismiss massive amounts of the teachings of this faith in order to continue being the decent human being that it seems you are.
Yeah,
And
I disagree with that.
that's not beneficial. You're saying this is a beneficial belief to have, and I don't think it's beneficial to believe something where you are required to cut around most of it in order for it to even be legal.
I don't think that there's anything that Jesus said that I don't believe. I think what he said
Jesus,
is
Yes, there is. We've talked about it a few times.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like we've hit a wall here, Brian. I've got more questions, but frankly, I don't think they're going to get us anywhere. Because not 20 minutes ago, you told me that you couldn't objectively determine whether or not I was a fucking magic horse. So I'm going to move on to the next call. But
Brian,
I hope that you go back.
Yeah,
Sorry,
go back
ahead.
and listen to the call. I was gonna say it sounds like the same thing as you. Go back and listen to this
Yeah.
call, and maybe you said something that you didn't mean, or maybe you'll change your mind about something. Who knows? Call back after you listen to it, and maybe you'll have established a little bit of a better answer for some of these questions that we had for you. And I'd love to talk to you again.
That's very possible. I'm not good at thinking on my feet, so maybe I'll read it, listen to it again and come up with better answers.
Sounds bad.
Well,
Yeah,
and they
call
don't do
back
better.
if you do.
I just would rather hear like the truth, like what you really think and why you think it and all that. So call back sometime. Would love to talk more. Thanks for chatting with us.
Okay,
Take care, Brian.
thanks for taking.
All right. What a show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and the rumors are true. Forrest Valkai is, in fact, a hostage in my basement. If you would like to contribute to his freedom one day, you can do so by supporting us over on Patreon or becoming a channel member. There are specific tiers for specific shows or the channel at large. You can also send us super thanks. Those are great. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Also, fudge the algorithm. Go to one of these things. The algorithm doesn't matter. It thinks it knows you better than we do. Better than you do? I know you better, Hank. There's a bunch of people named Hank. I just freaked way out. Okay, go to one of these.